As you know, the Meat Eater Live Tour is on April 23rd through May 5th. Chances are in a town near you. What you may not know is you can win tickets to each of these events just by going to a backcountry hunters and anglers pint night. There's going to be a pint night in each of these towns: San Diego, Salt Lake City, Tempe, Anaheim, Boise, Sacramento, Missoula, Portland, Tacoma, where you can compete in Meat Eater trivia and win not only tickets to the show, but a chance to be on stage with all of us. So get your butt to a pint night, and we'll see you on stage.
You're listening to the Sportsman's Nation Podcast Network, brought to you by Lacrosse Boots. Now, if you guys haven't had the opportunity to check out the Navigator series, it's a brand new lineup from Lacrosse. They have the Windrose for men and women. They also have the Atlas, and that's what I wore during my rut vacation this fall. Check them out. They're very comfortable. It's a traditional rubber boot, kind of mixed with a traditional hunting hiking boot. They've mashed it together, and the outcome is the Navigator series. Check it out at lacrossefootwear.com.
My name is Clay Newcomb, and I'm the host of the Bear Hunting Magazine podcast. I'll also be your host into the world of hunting the icon of North American wilderness, the bear. We'll talk about tactics, gear, conservation, but we'll also bring you into some of the wildest country on the planet, chasing bear. There's 3 quick things that I want to say to you. Check out Northwoods Bear Products is one of them. Full line of commercial bear scents as we're coming into the spring. Be ready. Number 2, Western Bear Foundation. Membership-driven, nonprofit hunting conservation organization that is the voice of bear hunters in the West. Number 3, DU Hunting Supply, the hound supply company of choice of Bear Hunting Magazine. These guys have a full line of all Garmin products and all hound-related stuff that you would need. Great customer service. Check out these friends of ours. This podcast is super unique. I've got my wife on the podcast and then also 2 of our close friends. We're going to talk about generational continuance. We're going to kind of disclose some stuff about how we've raised our kids. And if you're a parent, this podcast, I think you'll enjoy it. We just had a great conversation with our friends Josh and Kristie Speilmaker and with my wife, Misty Newcomb. On to the podcast. This is going to be a pretty unique and special podcast. I have some very special guests on the podcast today. Really, this is a unique podcast. Yeah. I've had some collection of friends and family before, but this is unique. I have my wife, Misty Newcomb. Say hello, Misty.
Hi. Hello. I'm Misty Newcomb. And for those who aren't here, Clay is staring at me very intently.
Yes, as usual. And then we have our longtime, really close friends, Josh and Kristie Speilmaker. Josh, say hi.
Hello.
Would you like to introduce your wife?
I would. My lovely wife, Kristie Speilmaker, who has agreed to be married to me for up to 21 years now.
Up to? Like she's going to quit?
Like
right.
every day we kind of renew the contract. Like, are you going to stay another day?
Not true. I'm sticking around forever. Sorry, babe.
21 years and 3 kids later.
Good morning.
Yes.
Or hi.
Yeah, Kristie, say hi.
Hello.
Kristie Speilmaker. You know, there's always this podcast lull when you say introduce yourself, because you don't know what the host really wants you to do, like a full introduction, or should we
like
say
describe
hi?
ourselves, like the way we look or anything for?
I think we should play a game and describe the person to your left, like describe what they're wearing and describe.
Right.
No. So what we're going to talk about is we want to talk about really generational continuance, and so one of the biggest issues that we face inside the hunting sphere is hunter recruitment. And we know that hunter recruitment is a big topic, but part of hunter recruitment would be our actual offspring, the offspring of hunting families, and passing not just an activity to our kids. And we're going to dissect all this stuff, but how do we pass a value system to our kids? Because it's one thing to say that we want our kids to be hunters, but that's actually, in my mind, kind of a shallow depth perception, because you really can't make your kids become something that they don't want to become.
Yeah.
And I've always set a goal as a father that, I wanted my kids to be hunters and be passionate about something that I am. I think if I was a tennis player or a golfer, as we talk about so much on this podcast, I would want them to love what I love as well. And so I think that's a natural thing. But at the same time, I know that if you don't have a relationship with your kids, if you don't do a whole bunch of stuff right,
Yep.
you're gonna degrade that transfer of a value system. And what I've always wanted was, I wanted my kids to be fully exposed to the outdoor world, to hunting, to conservation, to respecting wildlife, to being raised on wild game. I mean, I wanted them to have an open door to that. But more importantly than that, really what I wanted was for them to capture my value system in such a strong way that it transferred to their kids.
Yeah.
And so that's really what we're going to talk about, is how do you transfer that value system. But before we do that, I want to give a little bit of context of Josh and Kristie. So Josh, I would describe Josh as a...
I'm kicking back here. I'm really interested to hear this.
To hear how he's wearing a pair of camouflage muck boots, a nice trendy vest, got a killer mustache. Josh's mustache in about 2009, one day I looked at your mustache and I said, it reminds me of the Bering Strait before the Bering Land Bridge,
Right,
in the Pleistocene. It was just, it like connected these two massive continents of hair. And it inspired me to go read a book about the Bering Land Bridge.
welcome.
Do you remember
You're
that?
welcome.
I'm being so serious.
I actually do.
Josh's mustache.
Yeah, Josh's mustache.
Inspiring outdoor riders for years.
So, no, Josh, I would describe you as you're hunting as you probably hunt every 2 years.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I love to hunt. I just don't get a lot of time to do it.
Right. You probably hunt for a stretch there. You probably hunted with me every year.
Yep.
For 7 or 8 years. But since 2002, you've probably hunted every other year, taken a couple of deer.
Yep.
You've introduced your kids into hunting. So you're not like a real serious hunter.
No, not.
And here's something I've been saying on the podcast as well, is that I am changing in the way that I view hunter recruitment, and kind of my default position with hunting used to be that, like, if you were going to be a hunter, you might as well be all in. Now I realize that what you do is actually extremely valuable to hunting and to your family. Like, because in terms of conservation and funding for conservation, the purchasing of hunting licenses is massive.
Right.
And so by you purchasing a hunting license every year, which maybe you do, maybe you don't.
I do, every year.
Yeah, you do, because you think you might go.
Exactly.
You have actually done as much for conservation in the state of Arkansas as I have in the last 20 years, just by buying that license.
Yeah.
I mean,
I feel a lot
true.
better about myself.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's value in people that just have a very small portion of their life that's dedicated to hunting. And it also gave your family a potential doorway, because, your kids will have that in their repertoire of activities of, Dad did some hunting. We used to hunt. And David is actually probably likes hunting as much or more than you. And has hunted quite a bit.
We've been fortunate enough to be friends with Clay and Misty for almost 20 years, and our kids have been raised together, and it's not uncommon for my son David or my daughters Ava and Mallory just to have been a part of a Newcomb family hunt, or just take off with Clay out in the woods and go hunt for shed antlers or whatever. So it's been a real neat relationship for our kids to have ties with you guys so that they can experience that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually was looking through some pictures recently, and when Clay killed Dagger, which was like a super important deer in the
Yeah, in
Newcomb history.
2007. Yeah.
Ava and Bear were toddlers, and they were both here because Kristie and I used to swap kids while we would go to work or school, and we would take care of each other's kids. And so
There's pictures of Ava
with Dagger, and we made a big breakfast that day when everybody came back while we were waiting. So we didn't. While we were waiting for y'all to find them, Ava and I made a big breakfast, and Bear went with Clay.
Yeah, yeah.
It'd be pretty fun.
Yeah. Well, I said all that, Josh, to say, tell us the story of your first deer when you almost got your eyes pecked out.
What year would that have been? That
Like
was probably
03.
Yeah, 2002, 2003 was my first deer. I was raised by a single mother who had really no desire to do anything terribly outdoorsy, and she remarried, and my stepdad was never very outdoorsy. So when I met Clay, I had always been interested in hunting and fishing, but never really had anybody to mentor me in that. So when I met Clay, he was just that was one of the things I was drawn to, was that outdoorsiness and that just love of really interacting with nature. And so I remember that first, actually, Clay and Gary Newcomb gave me my first bow. Was it's the high country, the old high country
Excalibur,
bow, which I still have to this day. And
Yeah.
when I go deer hunting, that's what I take. And so I practiced and practiced and practiced so I could be proficient with it. And the old rule: if you can hit a paper plate at 20 yards, you can kill a deer.
Yeah.
So I was ready.
There's new rules now that archery is like way better than it used to be.
So paper plate isn't going to
Like
cut it
quarter.
anymore. Oh my goodness.
No, that's a joke. Like they're talking about hunter recruitment and about how things have changed, and So
Kids
if
these
you can hit a
days.
pie plate, you're pretty good.
Okay, so I was ready. So we packed up one weekend for the annual Newcomb family hunt in Howard County, Arkansas, and we went out and we got there in the early afternoon. I remember we got there in the early afternoon, and Clay's father, Gary, walked me out into the woods and said, "I'm going to put you right here. This is my hot stand. We got the ambusher tree stand, which is about 10, 12 feet off the ground, ladder stand." And I was ready. So the next morning, I got up. Gary walks me out there early in the morning before dark. I remember that was probably one of the first times I had been out in the woods in the dark.
In the dark, before daylight. And we walked out, and I remember thinking, he's going to leave me here, and if I have to get out of here in the dark, I'm I'm going to be lost. And I remember we got halfway out to where the tree stand was, and we spooked a couple of turkeys. And my heart started racing. But we got out to the tree stand, and he got me up there and left. And it was still dark, and I had gotten up there and gotten situated, got my bow all ready, got my arrow knocked, and I was ready. And just as it was starting to get the slightest little bit of light, I could see some movement. And I thought, oh my God, there's a deer right there. And I remember Gary and Clay telling me, now don't move, just sit still. Look with your eyes, don't look with your head. And so I'm sitting there like a statue and like a big idiot, and I'm moving my eyes and I'm watching these with this deer. And it gets light enough that I think I can take a shot, and the deer crosses back behind a tree, and I stood up and I drew my arrow, and he came around, and with the skill of William Tell, I know he shot it. I drew back and let that arrow fly, and just drilled that deer right square in the backbone. And he just dropped, went down,
kicked a couple times, and he was done.
Lights out.
So I waited my 30 minutes and went down, and he was a goner, and it was probably I don't know, it's probably 300-400 yards off the road.
Right.
And through some thick stuff. And so I got all my stuff down and got it dragged out. And Clay had told me, I'll be back around 11 to get you. And it was 8 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, I got 3 more hours. Yeah. And so I went over and I dragged the deer off the side of the road. And I thought, I'm kind of sleepy. I'm going to lay down and take a nap. And so I laid down and used my deer as a pillow. And at one point, I woke up because I something must have caught my attention, and there was an entire flock of turkeys crossing right in front of me. I thought, oh, my gosh, I'm going to get a turkey. Because I remember Clay had told me you can kill a turkey in the fall, too. Yeah. So I tried to grab my bow, and, the turkeys took off and scattered. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go back to sleep. So I lay down and go back to sleep. And the next thing I know, I wake up, and not 10 feet off of my heels is a huge turkey buzzard.
A buzzard.
A huge turkey buzzard. And I tell you what, if a turkey buzzard could look excited, like he had just hit the jackpot, a deer and a dude, I mean, he was ready.
So, ladies, do y'all understand what happened?
Yes,
the buzzards thought he was dead.
We got it.
Yeah.
You got it.
Thanks for
Fortunately, there wasn't a swarm of them circling overhead. But
you were probably minutes away from having your eyeballs pecked out.
I was.
Or your innards spilled out.
And my entrails becoming my extrails.
Yes.
So anyway, I shoo off the turkey buzzard, and I started watching my watch, and I knew Clay was going to be coming.
And it was 8:15.
Yeah. I'd slept for 7 minutes.
So I was getting close to 11, and I heard that familiar rumble of that Jeep Cherokee.
91 Jeep Cherokee.
Yep. Coming over through the distance on those old gravel roads. And I
think I had a bumper sticker at the time on the Jeep Cherokee that said, "Give him the blade."
That's right.
Ted Nugent.
Yep. Absolutely.
I don't put stickers like that.
So I thought I'm going to.
I do have them here in the office, though.
I was going to try to play it off like I hadn't gotten a deer. And so I left my deer kind of tucked back in the grass there, and I walked out onto the road, and up comes the Jeep cresting the hill, and Clay comes, and he's a quarter mile away from me, and I see him start fist pumping out the window, and I was like, what is he doing? And he gets up and pulls up right against, gravel slide.
Dukes a Hazzard slide.
Yeah, and he says, "Where is it?" And I said, "Where's what?" And he goes, "Where's your deer?" And I said, "How'd you know I got a deer?" And he said, "You got blood on your boots." So
you've never been able to hide secrets, though, Josh.
No, it's true.
I could see it on your face from a quarter mile away.
So that was the story of the first, and it was a button buck, and I've had a long history with button bucks.
Yeah, he's killed a few more. That story started our. Really, it was a good start to our friendship. We kind of just got to know each other at that time, but we have raised our families together since then. David killed a turkey in the youth turkey season.
Josh's son, David.
Yeah. So anyway, we've had a lot of David and Josh coon hunt with us, and turkey hunted with us, and yeah. So to touch on the topics at hand. Did y'all know that Misty Newcomb is a PhD candidate?
Yeah.
Misty, you have a master's degree in what?
Child development.
Master's degree in child development, and is a PhD candidate for. Tell us.
You tell me. I'm just kidding.
Well, your bachelor's degree has 10 words in the title. It's very
absurd.
Yeah.
It's also essentially child development. My PhD is in public policy with an education policy concentration.
Yeah. Do y'all know she's almost done with it? She'll be Dr. Misty Newcomb.
For one day, I'd like everyone to call me.
So will you be Dr. and Mr. Misty Newcomb?
She'll be Dr. Mrs. Clay Newcomb.
That's how I go. That's what I go by right now. When I'm at work, people call me Mrs. Clay Newcomb. That's how I sign things.
No. So Misty and I have, we've always been very intentional about how we raised our kids. Misty did not, the interesting thing about us is that Misty grew up in a rural place, but not amongst hunters at all, really.
Well, there were hunters everywhere, but our family.
Well, your family weren't hunters.
They rebelled against the surrounding system.
Yeah, they did. Mm-hmm. And so the hunting lifestyle really was pretty new to you, even though rural lifestyle was not new. The hunting lifestyle was fairly new. I'm kind of trying to decide where to start here. What we want to talk about is the challenges with transferring a value system, the challenges with particularly boys in modern culture, and how the outdoor world plays into development. Where would you like to start, Miss Newcomb?
Well,
even with a little history, I was going to talk about, Misty and I quite literally raised our family on wild game.
True story.
We really did. It was like a big deal. We were married before we went to college and had kids when we were going through college.
Yep.
And golly, to kill a deer and to process it was valuable income. It was financially valuable to us. And then we had also made decisions early on that we, for health purposes, that wild game was a good option. And
I didn't grow up eating wild game. Our family, I was raised, my dad, I should say, was raised by hillbillies, like real live hillbillies. We'd go to Thanksgiving at my great-grandparents' house, and my great-grandpa, Louis Joplin, who was just a great man, would say, "Hey, guess what you're eating right now?" And you just hope he didn't say possum. Like, that was the kind of stuff. That was the kind of stuff. And I actually just kind of learned, don't eat over there. Don't, you just never know what he's going to tell you, what he's going to. They were really great people, but they were probably real live hillbillies. And I think my dad wanted to.
They were loggers.
Yeah, they were loggers and migrant farmers. All 3 out of 4 of my grandparents grew up as migrant farmers, would get taken out of the school in the spring. So I think my dad kind of wanted to move away from that a little bit. And so I would almost say we were discouraged from hunting. We were, the culture of our community, I think my dad really wanted to make sure that we didn't have, there were aspects of the rural lifestyle that he didn't like, for better or worse. That was just sort of his stance. He didn't really like that, and he didn't want us to grow up with that mindset. And in some ways that was really good, but in other ways it wasn't. And one of those ways was, that I would say wasn't very positive, was sort of how he perceived hunters.
Yeah.
And hunting. And so we never grew up around it. Also, the kids who grew up, who were hunters in our community, were not like these, upstanding Aldo Leopold reading conservationists. They were kind of wild people. It was the town I grew up in had less than 400 people in it, and sometimes you would hear stories, even just at school, about people poaching, and it just didn't seem very respectful. And even as a young person, I kind of picked up on that, and I didn't really like it, and so I didn't like hunting. The funny story: the night before I met Clay. There was someone was getting married. There was a big wedding in town, and people were talking about it. And it was friends of ours, and people were talking about, like aspects about them that were just a really great fit, aspects about them that surprised everyone. And somehow that got, young girls how they are, and sometimes the conversation turned to, what type of person do you think you'll marry? And I had one thing that I wouldn't marry. There were all sorts of things that I would look for in a person, but the one thing I wouldn't marry was a hunter.
Did y'all know that story?
No, I don't remember.
You don't remember that, Kristie?
Yeah.
It was the only thing that I just said, I know this, I don't really know much, but I know I definitely won't marry a hunter.
Man.
And the next day
We had a PR problem.
We did.
Yeah.
We still do.
And so I met Clay the next day, and very quickly on realized he was a hunter.
And out in the distance, God said, "Oh, really?"
Yeah, I know. I don't say things like that anymore.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he, one of the first conversations that we had, I realized he was a hunter, and he was a lot like he is today, just, real passionate about it. And it was sort of shocking to me that this person who could be so interesting and intriguing would hunt.
Good looking.
And good looking, absolutely. Bearcat Handsome 4 years in a row right here, guys.
Right. That's right.
Face for podcasting.
That's right. So anyway, it was a little bit of an adjustment, and Clay would actually come home. We didn't live in the same place, and so Clay would come back to where we lived, and he would pull out things from his wallet, little magazine clippings about. I remember the first time he did it. It was a magazine clipping about what hunters had done for the turkey population in Arkansas, and how since they had hunted them, the turkey population had increased. So that
was back when all the media we had was magazines.
Yeah, it was the Arkansas Game and Fish annual magazine where you see how much hunting licenses cost and things like that. But he would clip it out during the week, and then when we'd see each other on the weekends, he would read it to me or make me read it. Be like, "Oh, I got you something." And so he was kind of the way he is now. all that was there in the '90s as well. Anyway, so he kind of won me over, but I still thought it was kind of
with
weird.
The turkey population stuff.
That was a big deal. Not just that. Also,
she's always been a sucker for turkeys.
I'll never forget on February. There's a story that Clay told about a pig hunt. He named a pig jackhammer on February 13th, and it actually became a holiday in our relationship. And
instead of Valentine's Day,
we
we still
haven't
call
celebrated
it out.
in many years. Though
we always call it out
Day.
though, Jackhammer Day on February 13th. It was the day that he killed this pig, and he told. It
was the day that I didn't kill the pig.
Right, that he hunted a pig, and I think it was honestly the first hunting story I ever heard. And he told the story. And it was, I was hooked. It was so interesting, and he was so, Clay's a good storyteller, and he was back then as well. And he told this story, and I just loved it. And it actually made me think, I think I could, if people told those kind of stories, I think I might actually be interested, not in hunting myself, but it would, it was funny and had adventure, and I loved it. And so that was, Clay kind of changed my perspective on hunting because of how he and also early on when we were dating, he went on a hunting trip with his grandpa Paps and his dad, and the three of them went hunting. And I just remember thinking just how valuable that was. Family was something that was real important to us, and just to see three generations. He came back from college and went and spent a weekend with his dad and his grandpa, and they went hunting, and it was neat to me that they had that kind of tradition, and we had traditions in our family and a good strong family, but we didn't have that kind of stuff, and where three generations would get together and spend a weekend, and it was just, that was something that I thought was pretty cool, and really wanted, when we got married, I really wanted that kind of experience for my kids as well. I just think that kind of stuff is what helps kids become strong people.
What value is there in, I guess from even a developmental standpoint, to have boys that are, and let's just say, involved in the outdoors? So that could be hunting, that could be there's a big developmental block there that is normal human development that is missing in a lot of families that would be there with families that are letting their kids get hands dirty, and then for those of us that are hunting, that are really indoctrinating kids into the outdoors and spending time outdoors and not in front of computer screens and different things.
Well, I would say boys and girls both, there's this huge advantage in just getting them out there. I think that physically, just physically, it's better to be active, to experience fresh air and experience woods and not pollution, and not just inside, air and things like that. So I think there's physical benefits. I think there's mental benefits in that you just start to learn how the world works. When you, like we kind of talk about just the process when the kids go out coon hunting, they just have to open gates and go through different things, and they have to do stuff to get out into the woods. They have to do stuff. And all those things translate to just being a real normal, balanced human being. And there's all these studies of that are showing like increasing depression and increasing, and then there's these other stories that show the power of outdoors and the power of to push against that, the power of physical activity, all those things. And I think, hey, if we got more families outside doing things, and it might actually help, address some of those things. Instead, there seems to be, when kids get home, there's this bigger emphasis. A lot of kids are playing video games, and you see Fortnite, and you see that kind of stuff kind of being dominant inside of when there's kids that I'll ask, what'd you do this weekend? And they'll say, oh, I played Fortnite all weekend. And
that's
it's like tragic. That's a sad, and those games are addictive, and they also have power to shape how kids' brains learn and how they seek immediate feedback and immediate benefit instead of learning, hey, some of the greatest things in life don't have instant gratification. You have to kind of work at it.
Right.
And those are all things
we were just talking the other night about the when we go coon hunting. I take some of these young boys coon hunting, and there's a process of getting the dogs out, putting a collar on them, leading the dogs, opening gates. There's this process that to somebody who's done it is like no big deal. But to these little boys, it's like pretty massive stuff. It's always fun to me to watch a kid walk up to a gate when there's a truck full of people waiting on them to open the gate, and they've never opened that gate before, and they walk up to it and they try to figure out how to unlatch it. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of developmental stuff going on right there, socially and dexterity and problem solving, and you'd be surprised how many times I have to get out of the truck to go open the gate for the kid.
You know, Misty, when you're talking, you know, in my job, I manage a company that we do, you know, a lot of we do aircraft detailing and work on airplanes, and I do a lot of hiring, and I love hiring young guys because I feel like they come in with fewer preconceived notions about what work should look like. However, one of the issues that we've dealt with over the years is just an absolute lack of common sense.
Right.
I mean, it's like an epidemic.
Yeah, I would agree.
That I consistently sit new guys down and say, tell me your thought process and what you did. And I see there is none.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a key. So when I think about this whole conversation, Clay, one of the things I go back to is when our kids were young, we thought a lot about generational continuance and that whole transfer of like values. And I realized that in a lot of ways, kids grow up being told what decision to make. Like so strong that this is right and this is wrong that you never teach them how to make the decision. Yeah. And so Josh and I talked when our kids were young, and it was like, how do we begin to teach our kids how to make decisions? Like how to have a problem solving or a filter, like a line of filters in their mind that help them drive towards a decision. And to me, like when I think about, and specifically David's experiences in hunting, it's like the perfect analogy for how you teach a child the value system through which they should make decisions. So I don't, we have a 19-year-old, almost 20-year-old daughter, and we don't tell her what to do anymore. Mm-hmm. We might help guide her in her process. Like, she's like, I don't know what to do here. Okay, talk to me about this, talk to me about that. And it's the process of guiding her through how to get to a decision. But we're not going to tell her what to do today. I mean, we've done the work on the front end to help get her to that point. And so when I think about David's experiences hunting, like the first time he went out, turkey hunting, I mean, I've seen pictures of you guys taking him out, and he's like hip to hip with you guys under a tree. That's his first experience. And he's experienced everything going up to it. And when Dave would come home from a hunting trip, you didn't just hear about the hip to hip under the tree when the turkeys were about to come up. It was on the drive down, we talked about this and we did that. And then when we set up camp, this happened, and the campfire, and the entire experience was him being able to see how you guys function in that environment. And he started to learn from how you guys function in that environment. Over time, the pictures were David by himself under a tree. And David knew how to... It
was development. It was a picture of development.
And it takes time. Yeah. And it takes dialogue. And it takes teaching him your ways. And the thing to me about hunting or hiking, like as we speak right now, Dave's in the middle of the woods, no cell phone service, with a group of guys hiking. I don't, the thing is
we have no idea where he is.
I don't know where he is. The thing is that there's a sense of responsibility inside of that. And I think as you put responsibility on boys, they will step up to it if you teach them how to handle it. Yeah. So as an 8-year-old, as a 9-year-old, as a 10-year-old, as a 17-year-old, there's something about feeling the weight of responsibility of I have to keep myself safe and the people around me safe. And the process of development you guys took David through allowed him to sit under a tree by himself with no concern that he was going to put himself or anyone else at risk. Like, to me, and so now you got to the point where you guys trusted him. There's been a transfer. I trust him to make a right decision in that scenario because there's been development over time.
Yeah. Well, if we're talking about transfer of value system, the onus of that really falls onto the fathers and the uncles and the that are there with your kids in the woods to be able to take what's on you and impart it into them. And that doesn't happen without dialogue and without stories and without being an example. If you don't have that, then you're leaving your child to try to figure it out on their own. All kids aren't going to learn just by watching. They've got to be sat down.
They're not going to learn just by sheer exposure. You said a word right there, Josh, that I think is key that may not be in everybody's repertoire of functional words, and that's impartation. Impartation would be not just teaching them something, like a stranger teaching another stranger a skill. But impartation would be, an example would just be a father showing his son with a whole background of relationship, respect, love. I mean, just like this whole context of life flowing down into this moment when the son understands a bigger picture of what's happening and he catches a frequency.
Exactly. And that doesn't just happen in the woods. That doesn't start in the woods.
That's right.
That starts in your home when you've built a level of relationship that allows you to have connection with your sons and your daughters, which means that when you get up in the morning and you're interacting with your kids and you've put on this standoffish front, like leave dad alone, he's got to.
And then all of a sudden you want him to jump in the truck and spend 10 hours with you in the cold.
That's the perfect
miserable condition.
Exactly. That's the perfect way to end that transfer of values.
Man, we just hit on something that to me is one of the biggest things with generational continuance. If we could distill it down into one word, is that there has to be relationship between those. Relationship is the conduit for values. Yeah. So from a father to son, if we were distilling it there, but it could go to mother to daughter or father to daughter. But we're using that analogy. There's got to be relationship,
right?
Yep.
And so it can't start. And so many people had, fathers that were, maybe weren't the best. And me and Josh haven't been the best. We're very well aware of our shortcomings, but we're also aware enough of them that we're trying to fix them.
Right.
That's right.
Is that, you can't. You described it so well. Is that the relationship starts long before anything. And then you build a context for that relationship to be fleshed out and lived out. And to me, that's what hunting has been, because you're problem solving. You're giving the kid massive responsibility. They are understanding your trust, which is so important developmentally to a son or a daughter.
And I think it's also something that is sort of implied in everything that you're saying, but I really think this generation of parents needs to understand is it is led by the parents. Yeah. There's a lot of, I see this a lot, and even experience it a lot. There's a lot of focus on, we all want to be better parents than our parents were, and they wanted to be better parents than their parents were. And there's been this shift in, we want to do things that make our kids happy.
Yeah,
and so we let them drive what our activities are on Saturday and Sunday, and we overschedule them. We're playing soccer, or we're letting them play video games all weekend long because that's what they want to do. That's what the other kids are doing. We're giving them cell phones when they're little bitty and they don't have the maturity to manage it. And there's, as parents, I think one of the things you have to do is say, hey, I'm leading this family. We're leading this family. Mm-hmm. We are the ones that set the expectation for what we do. And the kids might not always like it. And it might be different
that is okay.
than what they're experiencing
Parents have
at school.
forgotten that they are parents.
Yeah. And that's part of that culture that you've got to set as well. Or else, if you give a kid the option of just sitting and watching TV all day and doing nothing, they might choose that.
Yes,
and that's
they will.
So dangerous.
Even our kids who have been, there's still times when I have to enact a veto on their plans and say, this is what we're going to do with hunting. Sometimes they would rather stay home. And then the second that they get out, they realize that that this was a good decision. But I think I could speak for Josh and Kristie and Misty and I as well, is that options are sometimes bad for kids.
Absolutely.
And this whole, it's a trend of the age. There's always a trend of the age for a certain period of time. And right now, parenting is designed to make kids happy.
Yep.
Like I hear parents ask their kids all the time, what do you want to do? What do you prefer? What do you, man, Josh, I learned this partly from you, is sometimes you don't give your kids any options. No. I mean, the number one priority is not what makes them happy. Number one priority is what's best for the family, the biggest picture. And that's the way they're going to have to operate when they're a father, is not what's best for them, not what's best for me, but what's best for my family, what's best for my development. So, wider context and then also development. And,
knowing what's best requires maturity. And if you're looking to your kids to decide, you should have more maturity than your children.
Yeah.
So that decision should be left to you as the parent.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
My day job, I'm in a corporate environment, and I see the fruit of some of this discussion. I was talking to a gentleman who, 25 years with the company that I work for, been there a long time, faithful in his job, has a 20-plus-year-old son who is still at home. He gets home from work and he's playing video games, and he's kind of just like, arms up, I don't know what to do. And I think what happened to the father who has invested in providing for his family and having a home for them, and somehow his son hasn't picked up on that he has that responsibility as well. And it's sad.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's sad because you feel like you've spent 20 plus years of your life with no fruit.
Parents feel like they're victims of the trends. Like that guy just throwing up his arms saying, what am I supposed to do? He plays video games all the time. A tagline that if a person were to write a book, they could write a book, and the tagline would be life against the trends, life in opposition of the trend. I think that could describe us as you can't let the trends of the age dictate how you parent.
Right.
But I didn't mean to cut you off, but I thought
I think going, what you're saying is, something we've talked about, something is always being built. And as parents, we're either building it, but if we're not going to take that mantle up, something else, and maybe it's the trends of the environment, is going to build our kids. Mm-hmm. And so we get that choice as to what we're going to choose.
Misty, do you remember, talk about what you have heard, what people have asked you?
I was just going to say, we'll go places and people will say, man, we see, we went somewhere and a video of River was shown, and people came up afterwards and they were just like, man, we really wish our kids would do that, but they just have their phones and their games. We can't get them outside. And they're talking about 9 and 10-year-old kids. And it's like, who's paying for that phone? You got a lot of power here in this situation. You can get them outside. And people are giving kids phones. They're giving them cell phones as if they have no choice. And those
they're being pressured by society.
Right. And you have a choice. You have
to give their kids phones about 5 years too early.
And
would you guys agree with that?
Yep.
Yeah. And so kids are getting these phones, but they don't have the maturity to honestly, there are a lot of adults who don't have the maturity to handle social media, and we're giving these things to 10-year-olds who haven't been developed yet. And one of the things that I see is that a person's identity is really built by the boundaries that are set up around them. And so it's hard to build boundaries. You are pushing against the grain. It'd be easier to just say, I'm not going to put any boundaries on these things. I'm going to just let life run by default. But it really communicates to your child that you're not really actively building an identity. But by saying to our kids, hey, we're not going to have cell phones till you're 14. If you have to have one, we'll give you a flip phone, but we're for sure not having smartphones until you're 14. You're not going to have social media until a certain age. What we're really communicating to them is your life has some boundaries. Your life has some definition inside of it, and we're not people who get caught up in technology. And that really, it might not be easy for the kids to take. And we've heard it from our kids. Our kids aren't perfect. And we've heard, well, everybody else has this or everybody else has an Xbox. And we'll say, okay, we don't. That's not who we are.
I love teaching our kids that it is very much okay and a part of their identity to be different.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I like it that my kids aren't on social media and that we put boundaries, because the truth is boundaries another trend of the age is that boundaries are bad. Somebody telling you what to do is bad.
Yeah.
It's a very American thing. And you know what? Love is boundaries.
Right.
Yeah.
Love is someone putting boundaries on your life to know what's safe, and that's a big part of parenthood.
Yeah.
It's a big part of what's missing from a lot of families. You got to have the guts as a parent to put boundaries, and it's easy if you do it from the beginning. And I mean, we've not been without drama in both of our families.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
our
sure.
kids have gone through ups and downs.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the one thing I think sometimes parents think if they're perfect parents, their kids will never struggle. And we are not perfect parents.
Nope.
And some of our kids have struggled at different times with different things, but they go through, if the parent stays consistent, if the parent stays in the same mind frame of resolution for whatever it is and continuing to,
It's
the
almost like
kids come through
you're putting pressure on them to stay inside of those boundaries of what healthy life is.
Yeah.
And so the parent has to constantly, and sometimes you have to put a lot of pressure to keep them there. And sometimes you don't, because they're making good choices and
Right.
good decisions. But with each kid, it's been different, and it's been different. There's been different
absolutely.
pressure points that we've had to push back on. But I think you don't have to be, I'm not a hunter. I'm not. I have gone hunting, and I like to go sit with the kids sometimes. When they go to bear camp, there have been a couple times where I've gone and sat with one of the kids. I'm not a hunter, but I appreciate hunting in my home. I appreciate. I really appreciate the meat. We still eat. I mean, I care a lot about healthy eating, and organic food is pretty expensive, and this is a pretty easy, cheap way to get, or inexpensive way to get. To get organic meat, and my kids know that. I support that. I support that by supporting Clay when he takes them out, by tolerating the muddy boots that seem to be consistently on our porch.
probably the biggest problem in our life.
Probably the big. Yeah, there could be others. There could be other things that there is. Just having Clay away when the kids were little, that was tough.
Right.
When Clay would leave, and real early on, I realized, hey, this is going to be if you want that 3-generation trip, and you want the resilience, and you want all the good things that come with this, you have to be willing to put up some sacrifice yourself. So I'm very conscious to never be vocally oppositional towards hunting, or vocally oppositional even towards the time away,
And it is a lifestyle choice.
It is, yeah.
I mean, I have lots of great friends that are great families and great men that don't hunt, and they don't go away for days at a time on a hunting trip, and
Yeah.
So there's a cost to everything.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
a cost to being that way, and there's a cost to living life the way we do.
Yeah. And it's, when the kids were younger, it's not hard now. I mean,
Yeah.
when the kids were younger, it was, though. It really
Yeah.
did feel like a sacrifice for them to go away. Sometimes our kids got older, the older
And I
kids.
probably pushed the boundaries more then too, because I was immature.
Right. Yeah. And but I do feel like it was a thing where we just say, hey, we're going to trust each other. We're going to trust. And so that, when both of us have had careers that we're both really passionate about, and we're both the type of people who could give a lot to that, and maybe even more than. And we made a decision to just trust each other. And with that trust, to trust each other with how you use your time, how much work you take home. But with that trust came responsibility. So if I'm trusting him, then I've got to make sure I'm also managing my own self and governing my own self. And so that, Clay has turned down hunts, and he has turned down things sometimes because it's like, that will tax the family too much. That is too much. And sometimes he hasn't, and maybe he should have, and we kind of work through that together and work through those things. But it is something, I think, even when you're not a hunter yourself. I mean, it's super cool if a whole family. We know families where the mom hunts, the dad hunts, all the kids hunt, and that's really cool to see them with their little babies in their backpacks hiking through the national forest and go. That's super cool. that was not the case for our family. I'm very supportive of hunting, and I love public lands and love getting out there in them. But I'm not necessarily a hunter. But I've had to learn how to be supportive of that and how to make space in our family calendar for those kinds of things.
Let me introduce this book.
Okay.
This will take us back a little bit to my original question, but we all, Kristie, did you ever read Boys Adrift?
I read parts of it, but I never read the whole thing.
We've read Boys Adrift, which is a book by a guy named Dr. Leonard Sachs, and basically it says the 5 factors driving the growing epidemic of unmotivated boys and underachieving young men. Absolutely fascinating book that I would say every father and mother ought to read, even if they have girls. But when I first started reading the book, I was a little bit skeptical of what I was going to read. And basically, the book is just about the challenges with young men. And I was viewing it, a lot of it, through a context of parenthood that involved a lot of hands-on activity outside. The first chapter is changes at school, and basically it talks about how the academic systems are geared for less testosterone. The second chapter is about video games, and it gives all kind of crazy stats about an epidemic, almost like a health epidemic, about video games and how that is how the developmental aspects of that are hurting boys. They're able to engage in basically the emotions and the drama of actual activity without actually doing it. So they're able to have the feeling that they just went
like
on
a soldier
journey
or
and
something
conquered.
like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And emotionally, that those things are charged. I mean, those emotions spring up, and so they feel like they've actually done something, but they've actually not done something. And kind of the first time in history, there's this false thing that's happening inside of boys that can kind of mess them up, as opposed to going on a real hunt where you have a real challenge and you have real things that happen and you have real problem solving and you have to get your hands dirty, and because those video games are mimicking what happens inside of a person in a real scenario. So that's chapter 2. The fourth chapter is about ADHD medications. It'll blow your mind to read this stuff, and it doesn't deny ADHD, but it will talk about the epidemic of diagnosing these boys and medicating boys, where we would talk about how, I don't know, maybe some of our boys would have been diagnosed with this if we would have let somebody tell us that. But we didn't. And we worked through a lot of developmental stuff. And anyway, that's the fourth one, and this is the one, the fifth chapter was the one that I was most skeptical of, and it's called Endocrine Disruptors, and basically how plastics, until you read this chapter, you're going to think I'm crazy, but this is true. Do you remember, Josh?
I do.
Endocrine disruptors, they're called mock estrogens.
Yep.
And the best example, when I tell people this who I know will never read it, is that, Kristie, do you know... like when you drink a water bottle that's been in the sun.
Right.
It has that plasticky taste.
Yep.
That is literally mock estrogens, endocrine disruptors.
Synthetic estrogens.
Synthetic estrogens that are being released from that plastic that are in that water that you're taking in. And basically, the amount of testosterone in boys today is like 50% less than what it would have been in the 1950s. That's what, and the stats may be slightly, it may have been 40%, but like dramatic reduction in testosterone. And testosterone is not just sexual stuff. Testosterone is what makes a man, gives him his drive for work, gives him his drive to lead. I mean, there's a lot of powerful benefits, just like estrogen would have for females. And so basically, boys are different than they used to be because of the amount of plastics. Like Josh, you were telling me the other day you were watching them put in a water line down your road, or somewhere,
PVC water line,
and you were like, "Man, we don't really know what that's going to do." We do know for sure that plastics have soluble chemicals that get into water. Anyway, I was a skeptic. I was like, that's just somebody on a witch hunt. Bizarre though. Anyway, all that, I would suggest this book. Josh, what were your takeaway? Do you remember much about this? It's been 3 years since we read it.
I think that was one of the biggest things to me, was just the effects that was having on, to literally think that boys are chemically wired differently now than they were in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
It's like, you think about the advancements in modern times, and you think about that age and all the advancements that took place then, because there was a drive for things, and now there's such an apathy, especially in the generation that we have now.
The last chapter of the book is called Failure to Launch, and it talks about the massive epidemic of young men failing to launch. And I mean, it talks about the 35-year-olds still living with their moms and dads, unmarried, and different things. Just that was totally not normal in a different time. So
that's one of the main things.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Kristie.
Well, I was just thinking about also something that, placing value on things that are good and wholesome. Like, I think back to, reading and understanding when all the soldiers came back from World War II, right? And there was like the GI Bill, and some people put that towards college, and some people bought a home. Some men bought a home and created a home for their family and worked hard in a factory all day long for 50 years until they retired. And I think there's massive value in honor. It's honorable what they did. But today we would stand back and say a man maybe who didn't get a college degree and decided to work in a factory or to manage a factory or do something with his hands is not as honored or esteemed as the degree. And I think as a society we have to stand back and say, and we only know our own experience, but our son David loves to do blacksmithing, or he likes to shoot guns. There's things he likes to do with his hands, and we ensure that there's time and investment in those things for him because we find that valuable in the makeup of who he is. He's also very tech enabled. I mean, he interns with a tech company. I mean, so he does all that stuff
very
too.
Talented.
But it's like I think we've stopped valuing things that are just really ultimately honorable and valuable. You provided a home and benefit and food for your family for 40 years, clocking in and out of a factory, and there is nothing demeaning about that.
Right.
It's honorable, and I think as a society we've moved away from some of that stuff and realizing that, there's opportunity to capitalize on things that we don't think about. Big companies making commitment to buy American. Well, there might be some fantastic opportunities to establish manufacturing, small manufacturing that could sell to American companies here in America that doesn't require a college degree or doesn't require. And I think we're missing out on some of those opportunities for our young men by not saying that, hey, that's valuable too.
Yeah. Yep. I think as we wind down, if I could encapsulate what I think, how we transfer a value system into our kids, I think that a foundational piece of it is partnership between parents.
Yeah, definitely.
And that, like, if parents have to be on the same page. I mean, a husband and wife have to be on the same page. And there's people listening that they're coming from a broken home, that are divorced or different things, and there's still ways for parents to partner together. I mean, there's always a way. And it starts with parents, first of all, that are aware, that are concerned, that are willing to take a stand against the trend. I think that would be the biggest thing, and a big thing. And parents that are truly invested in building relationship with their kids, which does not mean making them happy.
Right.
Right.
I think that's a something that people have missed is that they think that building a relationship with the kids means making them happy or making them like you. Josh and I have always joked that we don't care if our kids like us. We say that jokingly, hyperbolically, exaggeration to make a point. But the truth is that when you have that mind frame, your kids will like you because they'll respect you.
That's not our motivator. Our motivator is not for our kids to like us.
Yeah. And it's playing the long game.
It is playing
Right.
the long
It's playing
game.
the long game, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course your kid's not going to like you when you're, for the 10 minutes after you tell them they can't get an ice cream cone when they're 5 years old.
Right.
Yeah, you're playing the long game.
Yeah, we're coming off of Christmas break at school, and it's been interesting to me how many. It's almost like we have a 14-year-old son and a 16-year-old daughter, and they've brought in a bunch of kids all break long to go hang out with Clay and
Coonpalooza.
Coonapalooza is what we've called it. All for the last 2 weeks. Just they want to coon hunt every night, and our son has woken up early voluntarily to go and hunt and to go across where he hunts at in the morning.
So he's coon hunting at night and deer hunting
in the morning. And he comes home and I watch how animated he is talking to Clay about everything he did and everything he saw. And it's like, yeah, you know what? There were times where we had to force our kids to put long johns on and wake up, or we had to do some sacrifice here. Bribery with bug juice, bringing these little sugar-infested drinks to deer camp and things like that.
Organic sugar, right?
Bug juice is not organic, and neither is that dye. But
that's how we got Ava up a 4-mile hike in Rocky Mountain. Honey sticks.
That's right. We used cherry sours, getting them up to the top of a mountain on a hike. But now that they're teenagers, they're doing that stuff on their own. And like Clay said, we've had ups and downs. We've had teenagers who we've had to pull off social media. We've had to say, oh, man, we let this jack out of the box too soon. I mean, you got a phone and you weren't ready for it. And we had to go back and backtrack and say, hey, we gave you some liberty we shouldn't have. We're taking it back. And, I mean, people just thought we were crazy. Kids at school thought wow, they are crazy, and we were good with that.
But we had enough relationship with that particular child that it didn't crush them, even though it was very difficult for them.
It was.
But we've been playing the long game with that one from day one, and we made adjustments, and we weren't afraid to make a decision.
And we had to watch our own social media and our own computer time and our own stuff to make sure we were there to support and be there. It's tough to tell your kids to get off it if you're.
I was going to say what we have seen with our kids at school, and we live in a very urban town and for Arkansas, Fayetteville. I mean, kind of pretty urban. That's what I'll say. And our kids are like the cool kids at school because of hunting.
It's true, yeah.
I think that's pretty unique. Mm-hmm. And all the kids want to go. I mean, all Christmas break, there was lists of kids that wanted to go that we had to organize how to get to our house and when we were going to take them and all this. And
always the trend-setting Newcombs.
I'm trying to remember, Misty, do you remember the story of someone was asking the kids, there was a presentation at Prism, and do you know anyone famous or have you ever met someone? I can't remember. And Bear's answer was, my dad's a world famous bear hunter. And I think Ava, our youngest daughter, said that her dad worked at Sonic. Which
I have never done.
Which one wasn't true, and two, I don't know why that would make them famous.
When they were like 4
But they were young. I mean, kindergarten,
I'd hope Ava wouldn't write that
first
at
grade.
14.
No. They were. It was years ago.
If I had only worked at Sonic.
Anyway, I don't know what
you
made
took
me.
them there so much.
I guess.
It's on the way home.
And what's funny is at that time there was no. I mean, Clay had no notoriety as a hunter whatsoever. There wasn't a podcast. There wasn't a bear hunting magazine.
Bear Newcomb knew it,
he just felt in his heart.
That's right.
He killed that big old deer.
Yeah.
That big bear.
Well, I was trying to summarize what we're saying.
This happens a lot when we get together.
Yes, relationship with kids, not being afraid to go against the trend.
That's right. Play the long game.
Play the long game with them. the earlier you get started, the better.
But it's never too late.
That's
and
right.
build a culture around what you value. You know, I think something that maybe has been lost in some ways in fatherhood, and fathers are ones that do this. Mothers have a big part in it. I mean, a massive part in it too. But it can't just start. The way it works best is if it starts with a father. I believe that is that culture is built inside of a home around the things that you value. And there's something, so, you know, we have built a value system that has honored and valued hunting and stuff. But it's deeper than that, though, because ultimately the value system goes into the principles by which we live by. You know, so yeah, hunting, we go out and shoot animals, but there's principles, there's responsibility and stewardship and integrity and honesty. You know, I mean, game laws, nobody's watching over your shoulder to make sure you obey them. I mean, like there's an internal value system that's even a layer deeper than external activity that we emphasize, that we talk about. And but not every family is going to have hunting built around it in the same way as we have. Just like you guys haven't, Josh. I mean, like hunting's not been the biggest thing, but your value system has significantly been transferred to your kids. They have an identity. They know who they are. They're not afraid to be different. And that's really the main thing that I wanted to talk about, and just kind of give people just a little peek. It's hard to have a conversation like this just because where do you start?
Right.
From starting at zero to someone who just logged into a podcast to getting to the depths really of how we parent. You know what I was going to start the podcast out with? Talking about biological success. In the biological world, success would be defined as when someone produces viable offspring. Okay, like for a bear to be biologically successful, it would mean that bear would reproduce itself into offspring that was also able to reproduce viable offspring. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely.
And really, our success as humans, in my mind, is to produce a replication, not of ourselves, because our kids will be different, but that have a value system that is able to be replicated again through them. Like, I will be happy when my sons and daughters have families, and and really, I hope they're hunters, but I don't care if they're hunters. What I care is that they would have those underlying principles that hunting gave them deeply instilled into their kids for generations to come. So generations of kids that I may never know that carry the Newcomb name would be honest and have integrity and would be responsible and would be introspective and would have all these values, you know. So my success would be that my kids would have that and pass it on to their kids.
Yeah,
generational
absolutely.
continuance. It's something we talk about.
Yep.
And I think that if we do it right, that I bet 5 generations from now, should the earth persist, that Newcombs will be hunters. You know?
Yep.
I mean, that's and again, I'm taking it outside of the hunting space and say this hopefully could be, hopefully parents got something from this. Do you remember, Josh, Kristie was talking about one of the first turkey hunts we went on with our kids? I'll end with this story, and then I'll give you guys closing comments. We took David, Willow, and Mallory.
Yes.
Youth turkey hunting.
Yes.
And we got on some turkeys on public lands.
Some beard swinging big old gobblers.
Who had the gun?
David Speilmaker.
Well, this was, yes, okay. David had the gun. So there's 5 of us, me, Josh, and these 3 little kids. I mean, they could hardly hold the shotgun up. And we heard a gobble, moved in. I call, pow, here come the turkeys. I had told the kids, I was trying to tell them how still you had to be. And I told Mallory, I told all the kids.
I don't know what it is about when you tell somebody to be still. I mean, it really gets deep inside them.
Yes. Well, I told them, I said, a turkey can see your eyes moving. You have to sit so still. And so when the turkeys start coming to view, Mallory Speilmaker closes her eyes.
And they walk literally almost on top of
three
her.
beautiful, bright red-headed gobblers come in and just strut in front of us. And
So
something
literal.
happened. That time David didn't shoot. Okay, it was a different time that he shot, but we couldn't get on him.
That's right. Yeah.
And then the turkeys just, you know how they do. They just strutted away and just kind of got lost interest. And then when they left, I was just like, "Wow, kids, did you see that?" And Mallory was like, "No, I didn't. I had my eyes closed." She had her eyes closed for 10 minutes because she was afraid those turkeys were going to see her.
Very literal.
And then later, the next year, David was able to. He was a little bit bigger. Every year, they just kept getting a little bit better at handling a shotgun. And eventually, we got David a turkey, but he missed 5 times one morning.
So, yeah.
5 times on the same turkey.
With a single shot.
With a single shot 410.
A long-beard gobbler on public land in Arkansas, too, at that. But, no, okay, 20-second closing thought, Miss Newcomb. Doctor.
Almost doctor.
Not a doctor yet.
Soon to be.
Doctor in training.
Not sure that Clay knows what a dissertation entails. No, just I don't really have any strong closing thoughts, but just parenting is tough these days, and it's tough to push against the grain, and we should all kind of join together in solidarity. And
it takes community.
It really
doesn't
does.
it?
Yeah.
That's part of what we wanted to
Yeah.
bring Josh and Kristie on. Is we really have, and not just Josh and Kristie. We got a wide net of people that we're really close with,
Yeah.
but we really have raised our kids side by side.
It would have been
with you
super
guys.
hard
Yeah.
to put the boundaries on our kids if they didn't have friends that
Yeah,
had the same
it's true.
boundaries.
Yeah.
It would have
It's
been
very
super
true.
difficult.
And that's part of the power of
yeah,
putting them in the school that we did.
and
Yeah.
the church that we did.
Shared value system.
yeah.
It really is a shared value system.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
it definitely takes community.
Josh.
Well, I think the thing that really is important to me and stands out to me is just the role of the father and the commitment that a father has to have first and foremost to his wife inside of the home. You're given a sphere of influence, and inside of that sphere of influence, your first place of influence is with your wife, and so it requires that you are presenting to her what a husband really should look like, in a place of sacrifice, in a place of provision, in a place of really just building a stable environment. And then, of course, the next place of influence is your children. And your children have to see that accurate pattern from the very top down. You can't skip the wife and go straight to the kids. That's not going to produce the fruit that you're looking for. So what that really means is that fathers have to be able to get up in the morning and evaluate and start their day off intentionally, and be able to create an environment in their home where the transfer of values is easy. Because there's lots of things that a father can do to restrict that flow. So you have to create that environment where that transfer of value is conducive. I'll put it that way, conducive. And I think the byproduct of that will be much more positive than just trying to let it happen. And I just, that's the thing I would say to dads and out there is be intentional. Don't let it slip by, and it's going to happen a lot quicker than you expect it to happen. If your children are young, you hear it all the time with the old timers that it goes by so fast, and you really don't know until you get there, but it will go by fast. And one thing I've learned, our oldest daughter was a very, very, very intense young one. And Kristie and I were not fantastic parents. We were new at it. We didn't have any experience. And she came out of the womb intense. But one thing that we did know that we needed to do was to be consistent and to give her consistency. And so we were consistent in our discipline. We were consistent in our love and tenderness, consistent in our compassion with her, consistent with being firm. And it's really produced a very incredible young lady. And it's not due to any secret parenting tricks that we knew, but just consistency and in being able to go back and evaluate and say, where did we miss it? Where did we do good? And to really make adjustments in our life and our parenting together, and to do it together. That's the other thing, is partnership with a mother and father. That's really what it takes.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I can real quick jump off of that. Just, I think about when Clay, how we celebrate when you get a deer or a bear that you've been going after, or the kids or whatever, and there's a lot of work that goes into producing that result, and looking back and saying, hey, it was all worth it. Like it was all worth it, even in the moments when you got it, in the moments when you didn't. And I think just talking to the people who are going to listen and who are hunters, that same with parenting. I mean, you put in the work and you will see good fruit, and you win some, you lose some. Like Josh said, when you lose them, you figure out what you can learn from it and take that into the next one. But in the same way that you go through the journey and the work that goes into being able to get the animal or whatever it is, like invest in parenting, it really does produce some great stuff, and we're really blessed to be getting to see some of the fruit of those years in us right now, and super grateful. I mean, I know we've said it multiple times. Super grateful to have been a part of raising our kids with the Newcombs and that wider circle of friends that we have. But man, we could not have done it outside of community.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, guys. Thank you, Miss Newcomb.
You're welcome, Mr. Newcomb.
Josh, Kristie. Thank you, guys.
It's been a pleasure.
Josh, you know how to end this podcast.
What? Say that again?
You know how to end this podcast. I'm going to let you do it.
I do. What's funny is I was just actually thinking about that. I was wondering if I was going to get to say it.
Do it.
And from the bear hunting global headquarters, we just want to say, keep the wild things wild.
Keep the wild places wild.
Wild places wild. Wild things too.
We're going to let Kristie do it.
Okay, Kristie.
Okay.
From the global headquarters of Bear Hunting Magazine, keep the wild places wild.
Because that's where the bears are.
That's where the bears are. That's right.
Keep
Clearly
the wild
your
places
number one
wild,
podcast
because
listeners
that's
right
where
over
the
here.
bears live.
God, we really blew this
That's
thing.
where
Man,
the
now I
bears
know
live.
how much y'all listen to the very end. Like, people get to, like, the last 2 minutes, and they're like, they're just messing around.
Listen,
they close it off.
You just need to have Shepherd do it every time, I think.
Yeah.
Right on.
As you know, the Meat Eater live tour is on April 23rd through May 5th. Chances are in a town near you. What you may not know is you can win tickets to each of these events just by going to a backcountry hunters and anglers pint night. There's going to be a pint night in each of these towns: San Diego, Salt Lake City, Tempe, Anaheim, Boise, Sacramento, Missoula, Portland, Tacoma, where you can compete in Meat Eater trivia and win not only tickets to the show, but a chance to be on stage with all of us. So get your butt to a pint night, and we'll see you on stage.